Okay, I think we are ready to go. So, uh, hello, good afternoon, everyone, or at least those of you here in the Western Hemisphere. My name is Mark Finley. I'm the Fellow in Energy and Global Oil here at the Center for Energy Studies in the Baker Institute for Public Policy at Rice. Welcome to our Friday Happy Hour webinar, and thank you for wrapping up your week with us. As many of you probably know, this month we've been featuring our graduate and postdoctoral fellows. Today, we will be discussing petrochemicals in emerging markets, featuring our postdoc fellow, Adrian Duhalt. Adrian is postdoctoral fellow in Mexico Energy Studies here at the center. His PhD thesis, which he completed way back in 2011, looked at the development trajectory of the petrochemical industry in Mexico. And since then, Adrian's research agenda has continued to keep an eye on this industry globally. He has written most recently about Mexico's ammonia and fertilizer sector. Also joining us today is Benigna Leis, a non-resident fellow at CES. Benigna has more than 30 years of experience in the energy sector in Latin America and West Africa. She retired as the general director of Chevron Energía de Mexico after getting awarded and signing the first deepwater contract for Chevron in Mexico. For both of our colleagues today, their research is available along with all the other fellows at the CES website. And we invite you to familiarize yourself with their work. So what we will do today is I will begin with some high-level market context. And then Adrian and Benigna will look at specific emerging market, national, and company perspectives, followed by Q&A. By the way, you may notice that here, for those of you joining us on the webinar, your chat feature has been disabled. And please post your questions using the Q&A function here on Zoom. And by the way, I don't know about you, but I usually forget my question if I try to wait until the end. So please enter them as you go along.
With a different twist, I will be talking about specifically about 3 examples of NOCs, national oil companies. How are they looking at the petrochemical and their refining capacity and their refining and petrochemical operations? So, and I will do this for 2 companies in Latin America, one in Petrobras in Brazil, and Pemex in Mexico. And then we will jump to the growth area that Adrian has been highlighting, talking about Petronas in Malaysia. So those are the 3 national oil companies that I will be highlighting and seeing the contrast in their different approaches about this sector. So starting with Petrobras, I know that most of you are very familiar with it, but just for a refresher, I guess, Petrobras is a company that actually is state controlled, but a part of their shares, and their shares are being traded in the New York stock market. And their focus right now is in exploration and production of oil and gas, and particularly they want to be the leader and the expert on actually deep water exploration and production. And they have been very successful with that approach, as you may have heard. So they are really doing very well in terms of having operations in blocks, the deepest in the world, literally, and increasing their production significantly. The interesting approach they have taken is that to actually being able or being in a position to finance and to grow in that area, they have decided to divest other segments of their value chain. And last year, they already divested their distribution of all the I guess, the gasoline stations they were already sold to another company. And at the same time, they have sold, they used to have whatever number of refineries, and they have kept 13 refineries, and they have sold 6, so they had 19 refineries, and they have sold them because they really want to keep only those ones that they are critical for their operations, and the other ones, they have actually divested them. Also, as a good national oil company, they had participation in everything under the sun, in gas distribution, in pipelines, in renewables. Well, all those businesses are actually in the process of being divested. And in terms of their petrochemical sector, they have done something, again, different to what other companies, based on what Adrian told us here. Rather than they having the petrochemical activity, they have participation in the in companies that are the ones producing the petrochemicals. So in that context, I guess they're securing their, they want to have a market for their supply of crude, and at the same time, a natural gas, but they are not the operators of these companies. So they have a participation in the companies I looked at. They have between 20 and 50% interest on those petrochemical companies. So their focus at this time, given again the market condition, is that they will continue their divesting process, waiting until the market is good enough for them to actually sell their assets that they still want to divest from. So, as I said, this is a very focused company. They want to be the best on exploration and production. Not only that, but they also specifically in ultra deep water, which is a very, very challenging activity to have. So the other company I'm going to highlight, also in Latin America, with a very different approach so far, is Pemex. And you have, again, been hearing about Pemex, I'm sure, for many, many years, because it's a very old company, has been in existence for more than 75 years or 80 years already in the market. However, they have been 100% state-owned. They have the monopoly in Mexico, and they're fully integrated. And the private participation has been non-existent along the value chain until the energy reform was approved in 2013. So then some companies got into the upstream and some companies into the infrastructure. But with the current government, President López Obrador, focus is going back to having Pemex as a monopoly and to use Pemex as a driver for economic growth. That is an approach and a strategy that all the governments in Mexico have had in mind over the years. Unfortunately, that has not been successful. And in this case, when you look at the refining or the downstream business, which is one business where you really need high technology to be efficient, to make it work, Pemex has 6 refineries with a capacity to actually process 1.6 million barrels per day. However, it has been operating at those refineries have been operating at less than 50% capacity already for many years. And unfortunately, to make things worse, they are currently, actually this week, one of them, but this month, there have been 2 incidents in 2 refineries in Cadereyta and in Salamanca, with fires and emissions of sulfur gases, which are very, very dangerous. So there are serious problems with that, with the operation of these refineries. In addition to the fact that they're not producing the volumes that they are capable of producing, because they need to be upgraded. Actually, these refineries were built to process light oil. And the reality is that the current production that peaked in 2004, it used to be 3.4 million barrels per day. Right now is about the last number, I don't remember, Adrian, I think is 1.2, 1.3 million barrels a day. And so it has been declining consistently, but they cannot process all that crude. As a result of that, the imports of gasoline and diesel have continued to increase over time. As a result of all this, rather than upgrading the existing refineries, the president, López Obrador, has decided to actually build a new refinery, which really, in this environment, is really doesn't make sense, because there is excess capacity refining in the marketplace. So to spend money on building a new refinery is really not economically acceptable, I would say, because it's a refinery that will cost, according to the first estimate, $8 billion, which everybody thinks is going to be significantly higher than that. And again, the likelihood that it will be built while the president, López Obrador, is in power, which was his objective, is unlikely. So rather than using those resources in building this new refinery, the right place would be to actually upgrade the existing ones and improve their operations, because then they could actually avoid having the incidents that they are having right now. So this is the situation on the refinery side, but when you move to the petrochemicals, the situation is not any better, unfortunately. Again, Pemex owns several petrochemical plants in southern Mexico, in the state of Veracruz. And in 1995, when these plants were built, I guess, they were producing about 11 million tons per year in 1995. Right now, they are producing 2 million. Again, it's the same situation in terms of million tons. And you say, why would you do that? And if Pemex doesn't have the capability to do this, the private sector has the resources and the capability to do it. And actually, that was very interesting, because President López Obrador visited one of these facilities in Veracruz. And at that time, I guess that was last year, he said that this was really an opportunity for this sector to have the participation of private resources. At the same time, since then, nothing has happened in terms of actually facilitating or attracting those resources into the sector. So for the production of these products, which are critical for the agricultural sector, for example, the fertilizers, well, a significant amount of those have to be imported. Then you have the other products that as Adrian was saying, for textiles, you really also need the products that are produced by these petrochemical plants. You have the same thing even for right now for the medical sector with COVID-19. We have all this protecting gear that the medical doctors and the hospitals and the industrial operators have to use plastic shields and things like that, well, they just don't have the capacity to build them to meet the needs of the marketplace. So the opportunities, there is no question that is there, because the market, Mexican market needs these products. So the big question mark in terms of opportunity and challenge is how is the market going to react, and how the private sector will react to the opportunities of the new NAFTA, the USMCA, especially considering that there is a big interest, as Mark mentioned in his remarks, of bringing and making possible that many of these products that were produced in China are brought back to North America, at least. And in that case, the supply chain could actually benefit from having many of these products produced in Mexico. Mexico has an opportunity to actually make this happen through this agreement that is being implemented. On July 1st was the beginning of the implementation of this agreement. But at the same time, the conditions have to be there for the investors to be interested in investing in this sector. So how successful USMCA is going to be for that sector is one of the big questions. Talking about uncertainty, this is clearly one of them.
Excuse me, Benigna?
Yeah.
In the interest of time, and to make sure we leave time for robust Q&A, can I ask that we pause here and let Adrian move to the Q&A, and we can look to address your comments on Petronas, in the subsequent conversation?
Sure, absolutely.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you for your flexibility.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Okay, let's continue with the conversation. We have a few questions for the three of us, but I'm gonna start with Mark. Mark, what's your take about petrochemical feedstock? Because is it going to be oil everywhere, or in the US, is it going to be natural gas liquids? I mean, natural gas liquids will continue to be the main source of feedstock. What's your take about this?
I think it comes down to cost and comparative advantage. I think one of the interesting dimensions of the global petrochemical system is exactly what you highlighted, Adrian, and that here in the United States, it tends to be a natural gas-based industry, and most of the rest of the world uses naphtha and oil-based feedstocks as their base. And so I think one of the very interesting questions going forward is what are the relative economics of natural gas prices versus oil prices, but there's other sources of comparative advantage as well. For example, in a climate constrained world, the Baker Institute is engaging in some research, working with the city of Houston and the Gulf area on prospects for carbon capture and sequestration. In a more carbon constrained world, a competitive carbon capture industry could be a significant additional source of comparative advantage as well. And it's worth bearing in mind that we know how to make these feedstocks from other applications as well. I mean, coal-based, bio-based feedstocks. And so it's all a matter of, to me, economics taking into account the cost of climate and carbon mitigation as well.
Yeah. One of the questions we are getting from the audience is, will Houston still be a petrochemical hub in 2030? I think it's close to your remarks.
Yep, that's I think a lot of brains are asking a lot of smart people are asking the same hard questions.
Yeah. Benigna, so you were talking about. You were talking about Mexico. So what do you think about this administration? What are the chances for the petrochemical industry to attract investment under the current government? Is it feasible?
Well, as I said, I think that the reality is that the conditions have not been put in place for that to happen. So the USMCA will facilitate that process. But as I said, the government has to be proactive to do that. And as I said, they have said that they will, but again, nothing has happened yet. So I guess it's a matter of wait and see whether the government will face the fact that they really need private investment in the sector and accept, because this is an ideological commitment, really. The fact that the government doesn't want to have private investment is the ideological conviction that they want the government, everything to be owned and managed with government funds.
Adrian, you know a thing or two about Mexico. What do you think?
Yes. Well, I would like to add that these are like challenging times in Mexico, but the reality is that there are huge opportunities within the petrochemical industry, as well as challenges. But I've been looking at, for example, the natural gas ammonia fertilizer industry in Mexico, and there is a huge market that needs to be served. And at the moment, well, imports are filling the gap. But for example, take urea, nitrogen fertilizer that needs ammonia, and 100% of domestic consumption comes from abroad. So that's one project that could help the administration of López Obrador and boost economic growth when conditions are restored after the coronavirus. So as in the case of other emerging economies, I think the petrochemical industry could be a driver of economic growth in Mexico. And there are plenty of opportunities, not only with respect to ammonia fertilizer, but one of the challenges is domestic supply of inputs. As you know, natural gas production of natural gas has been declining in Mexico sharply since, I don't know, a decade or so ago. And now more than 60% of domestic consumption is made by imports, mainly from the US. And also there are like transportation challenges. The southeast of Mexico has no access to the infrastructure of the natural gas coming from other areas, like from Texas. So there are like infrastructure challenges of infrastructure bottlenecks to be addressed. And that's one of the reasons why petrochemical production at Pemex, which is in the southeast, has no chance to increase under these circumstances, because production is declining in the south of Mexico. I mean, natural gas production is declining, but on the other hand, the region cannot have access to natural gas coming from the US for the time being. Probably these challenges are going to be sorted out in the future, but
yeah, but what would it take for those I guess for those situations, for those challenges to be overcome? As I said, at this point is the ability to open those markets to private investment. What would it take?
Well, investment in operating existing infrastructure. You don't need to build a new pipeline.
No, but how would you manage to actually break that barrier why people are not doing it? Because there are people interested and willing, as in Asia, for example.
Yes,
they are investing. So why they are not investing in Mexico?
I think the main problem is political. Because this government has put Pemex at the center of its energy policy. But in my opinion, it's underestimating the damage made by previous administrations. So the actions taken by this government are not what Pemex really needs. And petrochemical industry is one of the areas where the president has said that private investment is welcome, as you mentioned, but nothing has really happened. So I think Mexico is losing time in delaying this conversation about what to do with the petrochemical industry, at least the state-owned petrochemical industry. Shall we take some questions from the audience? Mark, Benigna?
Sure.
I noticed a few on Saudi. Do you want to try to pull a couple of those into one question, Adrian?
Yes, let me.
Oh, well.
So what's the strategy of Saudi Arabia?
I think, I think in a nutshell, that's the question. I'd be interested in your thoughts.
Okay. Yes. Well, Saudi Aramco is betting heavily on petrochemicals. I think this strategy has different goals. You know, to diversify, first of all, to reduce dependency on oil revenues for the kingdom, but also to take advantage of opportunities in Asia, you know, in China and India. So by having or reaching agreements with companies in these two countries, basically what Saudi Aramco is doing is to secure demand for its own oil production. And basically what they want is a larger share of the benefits of economic growth in Asia and a growing population in Asia. So they are like one of the few companies that are taking serious steps in that sense.
I think, as you know, the merger with SABIC is an important part of that as well, and in some ways it's very similar to the classic Saudi downstream approach in with refined products as well, looking to build special relationships with key markets and to make sure that they have access for their product in the downstream.
And with these estimates of demand for transport fuel, what they also want is to maximize the value they can get from their oil production. Benigna, were you going to say something?
Well, yeah, what I was going to say, why in the case of Saudi Aramco, they are willing to go and partner with the private sector. So that example, why is that example not, I guess, not being copied in Mexico is one of the concerns. And that's the reason why I think this is literally an ideological position. So if you don't want to do it because ideologically you don't want to do it, what is going to push you to do it is, I believe that it has to be the need when you really get to the point that you have to, which is the case right now with Pemex having more than $100 billion debt. They just cannot do it.
Yeah,
so you have to accept. So I'm thinking that is actually the bottom line is going to be reached when the current government realizes that they don't have access to the market. They cannot continue to, they have been downgraded already. So their only option is to go to the private sector. And that is like a moment of reckoning. So they will have to accept and having the elements to justify the fact that they are breaking their commitment to the ideological commitment of not private sector participation.
I think another wrinkle for on the Aramco side is that I see a willingness to engage in basic R&D to not only play defense and to defend and lock down markets for petrochemicals as we know them today, but to also invest in potential future applications, that play offense a bit and build out the reach of petrochemicals into other sectors of manufacturing or construction, and to try to engineer petrochemical compounds that could compete against, for example, steel or cement in other applications, in the future as well. So it's not only a matter of a defensive mindset of, well, we need to move to petrochemicals because, transport is going away, but where can we build out new opportunities, with R&D? Yeah.
And I guess there the main issue is that Mexico has very, very strong engineering groups and very good engineers, but the research group, or the innovation group, have been to some extent limited. So they don't have that drive to go and convince. They have done that in the aeronautic industry because they're building airplanes in Cuernavaca. I know that they have a plant for airplanes in Cuernavaca. So this is a problem with the energy sector because that's the one that is tinted as the one that has to remain 100% state-owned.
There is one question here that I would like to address, and it's related to Reliance Industries in India. And the question is if Reliance will transform from becoming a refining facility to a petrochemical facility. I think the fact that Reliance wants to increase its footprint in petrochemicals doesn't necessarily mean that they are abandoning refining. What they want to do is to maximize profitability, and shield themselves from uncertainty going forward. And also, who wants to miss on the opportunity of growing demand from a growing population in India? I think Reliance is well positioned to actually reap the benefits of what's going on in India and what's going to happen in India in economic terms going forward.
And that is very interesting also, thinking about the Secretary of Energy having visited India and precisely Reliance, thinking that that potentially would be a good example to follow, but nothing has happened either.
Mm.
Yeah, coronavirus is affecting everyone. Mark, do you want to add something?
No. I actually there were I think one of the interesting threads here is the kind of role of innovation and the role of government policy and potential distinctions between national companies, which Benigna was talking about, and private companies, in trying to find ways forward in this.
I think that is actually the big contrast here. The companies that seem to appear more successful in reaching their objectives are those ones that actually have private participation. One of the comments that I have made many times in Mexico was the fact that when you have to talk to the analysts and explain why you didn't meet your objectives that you had actually spelled out in your last meeting with the analyst, that has an immediate result on the value of your stock. So there are consequences. Well, in Mexico, the fact that the objectives are not met, nothing happens.
Yeah.
Except the fact that the companies now, as actually it's been downgraded by the rating agencies. But that is a different situation. It's not like immediate feedback.
Yeah, and I would like to add that successful companies, pursuing this type of capital-intensive projects, they don't normally go alone. All the examples I review for this webinar are between 2 or more companies. So joint ventures, partnership, you name it. But the strategy is not to go alone. So
exactly.
That's a strategy to diversify risk.
Exactly. You have to diversify the risk and also bring different skill sets. Because if you are going to partner with a company that what is that company going to bring to you? If you don't need what that company has to offer, there is no point to partner with them, unless it's just a money issue. But usually the most successful partnerships are the ones where you have money and different talents that you are bringing together.
It takes us back to comparative advantage where we started, and I think it is worth bearing in mind and reminding ourselves that these are very competitive global marketplaces. And so I think one of the challenges that all the companies and all of the countries that we've discussed here today is who wins in the competition, and what do you bring to the competition that gives you a leg up on everybody else who wants into this space. And a rapidly growing market isn't enough. Just because something is growing rapidly doesn't mean that you can make money at it. You still have to have a competitive advantage against somebody else. Either on the upstream, the downstream, technology, policy. It's there are lots of different ways to gain that advantage, but that's what it will all come down to in a competition.
Yeah.
We are always very conscious of in the webinars that your time is the most valuable asset that you have, and so let me go ahead and try to wrap us up here. First, by thanking Adrian and Benigna, for your very insightful and enjoyable conversation. Thank you so much, and I certainly appreciated it and learned a lot.
Thank you.
Oh, and an administrative note: there will be no webinar next week. We on college campuses, one of the frequent phrases that you hear is "see you in September," but we at Rice are always trying to stay a step ahead, so we will see you in August. And to everyone who has joined us online, thank you again for spending time with us this afternoon. We hope you
Have a
found
great
this
weekend.
webinar.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you.
To the
we hope that you and your loved ones keep safe and well, and that you enjoy a great weekend. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.